Hello and welcome to the Art of Being Human. We're going to continue today with PTSD because I didn't finish it last time, and I just want to go on with it and talk to you more about it because I suspect that a lot of people have it who don't know that they have it. They know they have symptoms, anxiety, depression, flashbacks, all kinds of symptoms, but they haven't lumped them together into one disorder. And so I want to help you pinpoint, in case you do have it, you should see somebody just to get that diagnosed, just so that you know, and get help with dealing with it. Now, I know the PTSD, it's basically based upon you have been abused or you've seen abuse. You've been traumatized or you've seen trauma. You either experience it or you see it, and you're kind of in touch with it because you see it. You see your best friend shot, for example, they die, you live. You get PTSD because you're horrified at the fact that life is so fragile that your friend was taken and wonder why it wasn't you. A lot of people who have injuries in wartime, and I'm focusing on wartime because it's so prevalent there, but in any situation where someone's been injured and the person beside them isn't, and they always go through this, why me? Why wasn't I the one to get it? Why was my friend the one to get it? I had a friend of mine who was in a foreign country as a missionary, and she had a friend that was shot and killed, standing right beside her, and she didn't get it. And so you go through this horrible, why wasn't it me? Why wasn't it me? And I think all of that can be also a part of a post-traumatic reaction, because life is fragile and yet life is strong at the same time. Well, I want to go over the symptoms. Oh, and also I read some of the statistics I've read is that 7 to 8% of people, I know it doesn't seem like a lot of a high percent, but 7 to 8% of people in just everywhere have PTSD at some point during their lives. It's not a disorder that you're going to have for the rest of your life. If you get treated for it and the symptoms get treated, then you can recover from this, just like you can recover from anxiety disorders, you can recover from depression. A lot of these things that are so horrific, you can get help with and you can recover from. And remember, and I know when I first started the show I was explaining, and I think maybe I need to revisit it for the moment. You think because something is mental, you should have control of it. You think that because it occurs in the mind, that your mind should control it, but you can't do it. And that's the way it is with PTSD, that's the way it is for anxiety, for depression, and a whole host of other illnesses that have to do with the mind. You have the symptoms, they feel like mental symptoms, they are mental symptoms, but they are also controlled by biochemistry, and you cannot control your biochemistry. If you are a woman in your 50s, 40s, and you start getting menopausal symptoms, you can argue with yourself, no, I don't have nervousness, no, I don't have dizziness, no, I don't have any of the other symptoms that I have. You know, the fear, the anxiety, the depression, all of those things that can go along with the menopause, which are mental symptoms. But the reason you're having the mental symptoms is that your body is changing. Yeah, you know, you don't have the estrogen you used to have. And as a result of that, you get these symptoms because it's a biochemical hormonal thing that's going on, and it gives you the mental symptoms. So you cannot control mental symptoms by the power of the mind if it's caused by anything that's physical. And in many emotional illnesses, it is caused by something physical. I saw a program, I know I'm just, this is kind of like an aside, but I saw a program about a child who was schizophrenic, a little girl who was schizophrenic. And she was a true childhood schizophrenic. They had her on medications, they had her on psychiatric treatment. Sometimes she had to go to the hospital, but she would have delusions and she would have hallucinations and she would hear people talking to her. She would hear voices and they would tell her to do terrible things. But and they dreaded it when she had a quiet day, because even though she was easier to take care of, they knew that on those quiet days she was actually hearing voices and she thought beings were talking to her and telling her things, and she was listening to what they were saying. So she wasn't being physically active and playing. At that time, they had another child who was perfectly normal, a little boy, but they had to get 2 separate residences. So they had 2 apartments, one beside the other, and they had to keep the little girl from her baby brother because they're afraid she was going to do something to him, because voices would tell her to. Now, did she have any control of it? No, she had no control of it, because it was something happening in the biochemistry of her brain causing her to have these reactions and causing her to be schizophrenic. And so they had to be careful so that she would not hurt her brother, and they had to have the 2 residency, and they did well with it. But, you know, after a while, when they get older, and she gets older, and she gets into her teens, and she gets into adulthood, what's to happen then? She might actually have to be hospitalized or put in some kind of a home, because they're not going to be around forever to take care of her. But this is one of the cases where you have an unusual case, but a true case of true schizophrenia in young children. Well, the reason I'm mentioning it is you can't help your symptoms. If you have your symptoms, even symptoms of PTSD, you can't help but have them, and you can't argue them away. But you can get help for them, and when you get help for them and heal from them, they will go away on their own. As long as there's nothing biochemical that causes them to continue, and if there is something biochemical that causes them to continue, then you may not have totally a PTSD reaction. It may be something else in addition to that, and it becomes chronic. Well, let's take a look at the symptoms of PTSD. How would you know that you have it, or how would you even suspect? Flashbacks are a big one. A flashback is when you go back in your mind to the traumatic event, whatever it was. If you were hurt in a street fight, you might think temporarily that you're back in that street fight again. You see some adults, male adults on a street corner talking, you assume that might be a gang. It's not a gang, it's a group of people talking with each other, but you do a mental flip and you go back where you were, you flash back to where you were and behave as if you were there, reliving the event. So along with a flashback, you relive the event as if it's present, even though it's past. That can be a very, very serious symptom, because you may react in ways that are not predictable. You may react in ways that are not normal. Somebody slams a car door when they're getting out of a car, and you think it's a shot, because it sounds a little bit like a gunshot. So you take a dive, you know, you just jump down, you hide somewhere, and no one understands why you're doing it. You think that you're hearing a gunshot. All it was a car door that was slamming. So you misinterpret what you see, you misinterpret what you hear, and it becomes a part of what you went through. It becomes a reliving of that trauma. That's the flashbacks. Nightmares can be bad. You can have really bad nightmares. You know, you're dying, you're burning up, you're being shot. Very bad nightmares. Well, there's no such thing as a good nightmare, is there? The emotional numbing, you're not quite connected. You know everything that's going on, but you're like feeling kind of dead inside. You just don't kind of connect with anything. I had somebody tell me, I would ask her, how are you feeling? I'm mellow. That's how she described it. I'm just mellow. It's just, well, everything happens. If it happens, it happens. I'll just kind of live through it. You're not emotionally engaged in anything. You're just there. You know what's going on, but you're not interacting with what is going on. That's the emotional numbing. And it does act as a protective device, because you don't get too emotionally upset if you're distancing yourself. But it's not a good way to live either. You have poor social relations, not getting along with people, arguing with everybody. Some of the soldiers that come back, they come back from the service, back to their families, and suddenly they're different. They're not acting right. They're not acting normally the way that their families remember them. You know, they're argumentative, they're demanding. It's all a part of this PTSD reaction. Poor social skills, being vulnerable. In order to have a good relationship with people, we have to be vulnerable in the sense that to get close to somebody, we have to open ourselves up. But these people feel vulnerable. They feel that anyone can step on them. They feel that they can't protect themselves against anything, that anything could happen and they're going to suffer the consequences because they can't protect themselves, that vulnerability. In alienation, you keep yourself separate. It has some elements. It has some elements of vulnerability, of emotional numbing. But if you alienate yourself, you do things to cause people not to want to be with you because you're afraid of them now. If you're afraid you're going to be hurt, you'll do something to make them angry. So they will back off. Then you feel protected because they're not getting close to you, because they don't dare to get close to you, because they don't know how you're going to react. For you, it's a protective device, because now you don't have to worry about somebody because they're not seeing you anymore. They're not calling you. They don't want to be called on the carpet and be argued with every time they say something. But you're doing something to cause them to back off. And if they back off, then they're no longer your friend. But you can say, well, you know, they backed away from me. Something that happened and they backed away from me. So it's their fault, not mine. So what you do is you effectively cut off human relationships. And when you cut off human relationships, who have you got as friends? You know, your friendships leave. They may say, I'd love to be friends with him again or friends with her again, but I can't because I never know when she's going to argue, when she's going to get mad. So that happens. Anxiety, and we've gone over that. The anxiety can be intense. The anger can be intense. Why would I go overseas and be shot at? It's everybody's fault but mine. I'm the one who's suffering here. You don't do what I want. I feel vulnerable. I feel like you don't care about me. I feel challenged. I get angry. I tell you off. You back away. We are no longer friends. Because who wants to handle anger? If you want friendships, you've got to be able to listen to other people, even if they disagree with you. You can agree to disagree. You can still be good friends with people that don't agree with you. But you can't be angry all the time, because if you're angry all the time, you lose social relationships because no one's going to be able to handle it. I wouldn't want to handle it either. Guilt. My fault. It's all my fault. I'm having all kinds of trouble, and it's all my fault. So you blame yourself for everything. Do not blame yourself for symptoms. There's no such thing as a symptom without a cause. That's basic to psychology. If you have symptoms, there's a reason for it. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm saying you're not at fault for those symptoms. And you have to realize something's going on and you need to get help with it. It's not your fault that you're having the symptoms, but it is your responsibility to get the help that you need so that you can do something about it. Disassociation, I haven't gone into it. I was planning to go into it this segment, but I'm not going to have a chance to. I think I'll do it next segment. In dissociation, I'll give you just kind of a brief definition of it. You phase off, you space out. A simple example of it is, and a very mild example of it, is when you're driving. You drive down the street, you know you have to take exit 15, let's say, I'm just making that up. You go past exit 15 and go to exit 16, 17, 18, you suddenly realize you've missed your exit. Why? Because you were kind of daydream, you were kind of in a reverie, you were kind of in a mental state where you weren't quite in contact, you were thinking about something else. You can still drive, you can still do things, but your focus is not on what you're doing. You're just spacing off somewhere. That's a mild form of dissociation, and everybody does it sometimes. It can be used as a coping mechanism. It can be a defense mechanism, and I listed early on when I did these shows of defense mechanisms and what they were. But there are different types of it, and if you have it to a severe degree, then you can cut yourself off from reality. You can do a mental split. The most severe form of it is going to be where you have what's called as identity problems, where you actually have a multiple personality. You can, in a very severe form of it, the severest form, develop different personalities, so you're not just one person, but you can have 3 or 4 personalities. You could have 40 or 50 personalities. I don't know what the limit is. There a limit? I think I heard of someone that had 100 personalities. But if you've read books like The 3 Faces of Eve, you'll know what I mean. And they're well-developed personalities, and you can phase in from one personality to another personality and phase back. It's like you've become more than one. And it is very healable. And the interesting thing about this identity disorders is that these personalities, if you have several personalities, one personality will know all of the others. Then the other personalities, they will know some, but not all of the others. And the idea in healing, and this is very healable, it's a long-term process, but people can be healed. They take and incorporate the best parts of all of these personalities back into the one person who you are and were intended to be. So it's a very interesting disorder. You have to be very bright to have it, because people can't split off unless they are very, very bright. But it's also very healable. And people who have been tortured, people who have been involved with the occult, people who have had a lot of trauma, tend to develop different identities, because as they split off, they do not have to face the trauma if they're somebody else. If you become somebody else, even for a while, you don't have to face the trauma that the real you has to face, because now you're not there. You've compartmentalized your personality, become somebody else. I know this sounds strange. If you don't have a problem with it, thank God for it. But if you do have a problem with it, it's nothing you need to be frightened of. It's something that you can heal from. And also, you won't even know that you have it unless you go into therapy. And as therapy proceeds and you get better and better, then your therapist will tell you, this is what you've got. They won't tell you in the beginning, and shouldn't tell you in the beginning. But as you become more aware of the personalities and more aware of who they are and get incorporated, then you will make the discovery that you are more than one. But that gets healed. And so you have a lot of hope for healing for that. And I think it is a lot more common than what some people think it is. So we're going to do more work with that next week. Please join me then. We'll stop it here.